Evening, friends. I'm Beau LeClair, and this here's the Dixie Tales, where the Deep South still whispers if you listen close. These are the stories that never made the history books, but live on in the heat, the dust, and the hush between crickets. So pull up a chair, tap that like, and subscribe if you believe some truths are too wild to stay buried. Now, let's begin. You can smell the delta before you see it. Hot dirt, mule sweat, and the kind of air that sticks to your skin like it's trying to learn your secrets. The sun don't just shine here, it squats on your shoulders till you bow to it. And somewhere between them, cotton rose and the hum of cicadas. The blues was born, not out of music, but out of survival. Out of men too tired to pray and too proud to quit. They say every corner of the South's got its own kind of ghost. But down here in Clarksdale, Mississippi, our ghost carries a guitar and a story. Folks been scared to tell straight for near 100 years. Name was Robert Johnson, skinny fella, sharp cheekbones, smile that never stayed long. Wore his hat tilted just so, like he was keeping one eye on heaven and the other on whatever was crawling up from hell. Now, I wasn't there the night he struck that bargain, but I've walked the same dirt. Stood on that same crossroad where Highway 61 meets 49, right as the sun was bleeding out behind the trees. And I swear, the air felt wrong too still, too watchful, like something was waiting to be remembered. Back when Robert was coming up, the Delta was a hard teacher. Sharecroppers bent double in the fields, picking cotton for white bosses who never remembered your name till you owed 'em money. Every Saturday night, though, folks shook off the dust, poured themselves some corn liquor, and gathered round wherever a man could make 6 strings talk. That music, Lord, it wasn't polite. It moaned, it laughed, it sinned right out loud, and the preachers called it the devil's playin. Robert started out trying to be one of them players, hanging round the juke joints, eyes wide, guitar slung across his back like a promise he hadn't learned how to keep yet. Trouble was, he couldn't play worth a damn. Son House, the great bluesman himself, told it like this. That boy'd sit down next to us, start strumming, and we'd near fall over laughing. Sounded like a mule kicking a tin bucket. They'd shoo him off the stage, tell him to quit embarrassing himself. But Robert just grinned, said, I'm gonna make this guitar talk one day. Folks thought he was simple. Turns out, he was just serious. See, the thing about the Delta, it don't hand you nothing free. You want to make music here, you gotta bleed for it. And Robert bled plenty. He drifted from plantation to plantation, sleeping in barns, playing for nickels and biscuits. Some said he learned his chords from Ike Zimmerman, a hoodoo man who'd practice in graveyards to keep the sound pure. Others swore he disappeared for near a year, wandering them dusty back roads with a black dog following close behind. Nobody knew where he went, but when he came back, Lord have mercy. One night he walked into a juke joint out by Robinsonville, quiet as always. Guitar slung low. The fellas laughed, thought they were in for another mess of noise. Then Robert started playing. It was like the air changed weight. His fingers moved faster than a man's eyes could follow, every note sharp as lightning, smooth as sin. The room went silent. Even the drunks sobered up. When he finished, Son House said, we all looked at him, and we said, boy, what done happened to you? Robert just smiled, eyes glinting like wet coal. I met somebody, he said, and that was all. Now you tell me what kind of man leaves a boy who couldn't strum in time and comes back sounding like the angels lost their minds. Down here, there's only one answer that makes sense. He'd been to the Crossroads. Folks whisper that tale like a prayer they don't want to finish. They say he walked out past Dockery Plantation, one moonless night, guitar in hand, pockets empty, soul tired. There, at the place where the 2 roads crossed, a man was waiting. Tall fella, dressed fine black suit, hat brim low. Said he could tune that guitar so it'd never sound the same again. All Robert had to do was hand it over and agree to the price. What price? Well, that's the part nobody tells the same way twice. Some say he traded his soul. Others say he just signed on to live fast, die young, and play better than any man alive. But I've been round long enough to know the devil don't always take the whole thing. Sometimes he just takes your peace. That music, it sounded like joy, but it carried a wound. Listen close to them old recordings, Crossroad Blues. Hellhound on my trail, me and the devil blues. That's not a man playing notes. That's a man confessing. I've stood in them cotton fields at sundown, where the heat makes the sky tremble. And I swear you can still hear him soft, distant, the slide of a bottleneck gliding over strings like a razor through silk. Every note's a promise and a warning both. My daddy used to say the blues wasn't born from the devil, it was born from men trying to survive him. Maybe Robert just gave that pain a voice loud enough for the world to hear. One night I asked an old harmonica player named Willie Catfish Boyd if he believed the story. He spat in the dirt, laughed low. "Boy," he said, "I been to them crossroads myself. Ain't no devil there. Just your own damn reflection staring back, asking what you'll give up to be remembered." Maybe that's the real truth. Maybe Robert Johnson didn't meet the devil at all. Maybe he met himself, the part of him that'd trade every comfort for one immortal song. Either way, when he came back, he didn't just play the blues, he became it. By 1932, word spread clear across the Delta. Sharecroppers stopped working early to hear him play. Women followed him like river mist. Preachers cursed his name from pulpits, and white men with record deals started paying attention. But Robert wasn't chasing fame. He was running from something, or maybe toward it. They say at night, when the crowd thinned and the whiskey burned low, he'd talk to his guitar like it could answer. "You still with me?" He'd whisper. "Ain't done yet." And sometimes, just sometimes, he'd stop mid-song, glance toward the door like he'd heard a knock no one else did. "Down here." That's how you know the bargain's real. The payment ain't money or blood, it's the sound of footsteps that follow you long after the song ends. So when folks ask me if I believe Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil, I tell them this: maybe he didn't sell it. Maybe he just tuned it. And if you ever find yourself driving through Clarksdale on a summer night, pull off near the sign where 61 meets 49. Turn off your engine. Wait till the wind settles. You might just hear a low moan of strings riding the breeze, soft, sweet, and dangerous as temptation itself. That ain't the radio, friend. That's the sound of a man who made the dust and the devil keep time. You ever see somebody chase a dream so hard it starts looking like a sickness? That was Robert Johnson, long before he was Robert Johnson, the bluesman folks whisper about. Back then, he was just a skinny field hand drifting through the Delta with a beat-up guitar and more hunger than sense. He'd walk miles with the thing slung over his shoulder, thumbing a few notes as he went, notes that didn't line up right. Didn't quite make sense, but you could hear he was reaching for something, like a preacher hunting a sermon he ain't been given yet. The men laughed at him. The women smiled at him. The children followed behind throwing sticks, singing. Robert can't play no guitar, in the same rhythm he was trying to learn. And through it all, he kept picking. Didn't cuss, didn't fight, just played. The blues scene in them days was a world unto itself. Sweat on the walls, whiskey in the blood, and the sound of a steel string crying for mercy. That music was raw and lawless, like the men who made it. Folks called them songsters, Roman players who'd turn any barrel house or back porch into a stage. One of the best back then was Son House, a preacher turned bluesman who played slide like he was talking straight to God about things the church didn't cover. His buddy Willie Brown kept rhythm beside him, steady, deep, never fancy, but solid as river clay. That's who Robert idolized. He'd show up at their sets, sitting cross-legged in the corner like a cat watching a butcher shop window. They'd let him carry their guitars sometimes, maybe fetch a drink, just to be rid of his questions. But when the music stopped, he'd grab one of their instruments and try to mimic what he'd heard. Lord, it was awful, Sunhouse said it sounded like somebody strangling a rooster, but Robert never quit. "I'm gonna get it right," he'd say, eyes bright, voice low. Nobody believed him, not one soul. Now, folks forget this part of the story 'cause it don't fit clean with the devil's version, but Robert wasn't just poor. He was cursed with bad luck. His young wife, Virginia Travis, died giving birth to their child in 1930. He'd been playing music against her family's wishes, traveling too much, spending more time with his guitar than with her. When she died, her folks said it was punishment from God for Robert's sinful music. After that, he changed, got quieter, meaner sometimes. He said to a friend once, "If the Lord won't give me what I ask, maybe someone else will." That's the kind of sentence you don't forget. See, the blues wasn't just entertainment back then, it was language. Every man who'd ever been cheated, whipped, or hungry could understand it, but to master it, you needed more than hands. You needed a piece of your soul carved out and set on fire. And Robert, God help him, was ready to burn. He left Robinsonville soon after Virginia's death. Some say he headed toward Hazelhurst, where his birth mother lived. Others say he followed the trail of an old musician named Ike Zimmerman, who worked as a farmhand by day and taught guitar by moonlight in the graveyard. Folks said Ike believed the dead kept secrets, and if you played soft enough, they'd teach you. He'd take Robert out there at night, sit among the tombstones, and make him play till the crickets stopped singing. That's where the whispers of Crossroads got born, 'cause where do roads cross more than in a graveyard? Months went by. No word from Robert. Some thought he'd run off, maybe joined a traveling show or got himself killed. Then one summer night in 1932, he walked back into town. Same hat, same smile, but something in his eyes had shifted. They weren't wide and hopeful no more. They were narrow, steady, like he'd seen too much and liked it. He found Sunhouse and Willie Brown playing at a juke joint outside Banks, Mississippi. Place was hoppin' moonshine flowin', women laughin', feet stompin' the floorboards loose. Robert slipped in quiet, guitar in hand. Nobody noticed till the break. Then he walked up and said, "Let me play a tune." Sun laughed, told him to go on, figured it'd be the same mess as before. Robert tuned that guitar slow, deliberate. Then he started. First note slid out like a whisper, smooth as river water, deep as a well. Then came the rhythm steady, haunting, built from the bones of sorrow itself. Every head turned, every breath caught. It was like the whole room was holding its heartbeat just to listen. When he finished, the crowd didn't cheer. They just stared, not sure what they'd seen. Willie Brown said later, "That boy could make a guitar talk, cry, moan, laugh. It did everything but bleed." Son asked him where he learned all that. Robert grinned, said, "I met somebody last year, tuned me up real good." Then he walked out into the night. That's how legends start, quiet, unprovable, but sticky as the Delta mud. By the next week, the story had doubled. Folks said he'd met the devil at midnight where Highway 49 met 61. Others said it was a hoodoo man who gave him a charm in exchange for his soul. A few swore they saw him kneeling in the dust while a tall, dark stranger bent low to whisper in his ear. All I know is, from that night on, Robert Johnson could play anything with strings, and every song sounded like it, had a shadow. He called it the blues, but it felt older than that. There was Africa in it, and gospel, and pain too deep for words. You could hear the moan of the field hollers, the shuffle of chain gangs, the ache of mothers singing over stillborns. It wasn't just music, it was memory. The preachers hated it, said he'd turned his back on God, made himself a mouthpiece for sin. But the people loved him, couldn't help it. His songs made them feel alive, even when they hurt. He'd play out by Dockery Plantation, or at the Three Forks juke joint, sitting on a stool with that guitar perched high on his knee. His foot would tap, his thumb thumping a rhythm while his fingers danced across the strings like fireflies. Sometimes he'd look up, eyes unfocused, like he was seeing something beyond the crowd, something only he could hear. There was power in that, dangerous power. Old-timers swore they saw strange things when he played. Lights flickering in windows, though, and the lamps were out. Dogs howling from miles away. And once, a woman fainted mid-song, saying she felt a cold hand on her back. Robert didn't stop playing, didn't even blink. That's how you know a man's crossed a line, when the world starts bending around him. But he don't seem surprised. He started writing songs that sounded like confessions. Me and the Devil blues, Crossroad blues, Hellhound on my trail. Each one sharper than the last, each one closer to something you didn't want to name. You listen to his voice on those old recordings, it's high, desperate, like he's trying to outsing a storm. There's fear in it, but not of hell. It's fear of what comes after you get everything you asked for. That's the kind of fear that never leaves. I remember talking to an old woman named Miss Ellie, who'd seen him play in 1933 out near Greenwood. She said he smiled the whole time, but his eyes didn't move with his smile, like they were looking at someone else. She told me she saw him slip out the back after the set, following a shadow that moved against the light. Maybe she'd had too much corn whiskey. Maybe not. By then, even other bluesmen kept their distance. They'd share a stage, sure, but not a room overnight. They said Robert's guitar kept humming after he laid it down, that it whispered when nobody was near. One man tried borrowing it once, broke 3 strings before the first verse. Robert just laughed and said, "She don't like strangers." But for all his mystery, he wasn't cruel. He'd play for anyone who'd listen, share a drink, share a story. He just didn't stay long, ever. He was always moving, like something was chasing him he didn't dare let catch up. Sometimes I think that's what the devil really sells you. Not success, not talent, but a restlessness you can't unlearn. A hunger that eats the peace right out of you. And nowhere at once. He'd show up in a town, play 2 nights, charm half the women, then vanish before sunrise, and the stories followed of men going mad after playing with him, of strange lights on the road, of shadows that hummed in tune. Once, a field hand claimed he saw Robert walking alone near midnight. No moon, no lamp. Said he was humming low, and behind him walked a tall figure, too dark to have a face. Didn't look human, he said. Didn't walk human, neither. When folks went looking the next day, there were 2 sets of footprints in the dust, one deep, one barely touching the ground. I asked my granddaddy about that once. He'd known the old bluesmen, seen the change in Robert himself. He spat tobacco, said, "Ain't no devil in the Delta, boy. Just men who ask too much of the night." Maybe he's right. But when you stand out there where them highways meet and the wind goes dead quiet, you start to wonder. Maybe the devil ain't down below at all. Maybe he's right there in the bargain we make with ourselves, the one where we trade comfort for greatness, love for legacy, peace for the sound of applause. Robert Johnson wanted to be remembered, and Lord, he got his wish. But memory cuts both ways. Every time someone covers his songs, every time a guitar wails under a blue light, that old deal gets a little louder, like the devil tapping his foot, waiting for the encore. I once drove that stretch of 61 myself, just to see it, the sign, the dirt, the nothingness that feels like everything. Pulled over right where the 2 roads meet. The air hung thick with heat, no sound but a distant hum like wires singing in the distance. Then, just for a second, I thought I heard a guitar. One note, long, mournful, then silence. I looked around, but there wasn't a soul in sight. Still, I tipped my hat just in case. 'Cause down here, we respect the dead, especially the ones who never stopped playing. And somewhere out there, in the dark between songs, I reckon Robert Johnson's still pickin', still singin', still paying off that bargain one note at a time. There's something about the Delta after midnight that makes a man feel small. The fields stretch so wide you start thinking the world's gone flat again. And the moon hangs low enough to scrape your hat brim. The frogs hush, the wind quits, and the earth itself starts listening. That's the hour when things older than sin wake up to see who's still wandering. Folks say that's when Robert Johnson walked out to the Crossroads. Now, you can ask 100 people where that spot is, and you'll get 100 answers. Some swear it's where Highway 49 meets 61 inches, Clarksdale, with that blue guitar sign watching over it. Others say it's deeper in the country, where the dirt turns red and the road signs don't bother with names. But the truth? The Crossroads ain't a place, it's a choice, and every man finds his own. Still, legends got to have a setting, and this one starts with a moon thin as a dime, and the smell of rain that never came. Robert walked alone, his guitar slung over his back, boots whispering through the dust. The last light from a juke joint died behind him, a faint hum of laughter and off-key piano fading like memory. He'd had enough of the laughing, enough of being told he'd never make it. He wanted something that would outlast the dust. When he reached the fork in the road, he stopped, looked left, looked right. Both paths looked the same, flat, empty, stretching into darkness. He sat down on his guitar case, wiped his brow, and muttered, "Lord, if you ain't listening, maybe the other one is." That's when the wind changed. It started soft, like breath on the back of your neck. Then the air thickened, heavy as syrup. The crickets went quiet. A black dog padded out of the ditch, tail low, eyes glinting red in the moonlight. It circled Robert once, sniffed the ground, and sat down like it was waiting for company. Then came the footsteps, slow, confident, like a man who owned every inch of dirt he stepped on. Out of the shadows came a tall figure in a long black coat, hat pulled low. His skin wasn't white or black, just dark, like smoke after a fire. When he spoke, his voice carried that lazy drawl that don't belong to any one place, just the South itself. "You been callin', boy," he said. Robert swallowed. "Didn't call nobody." The man smiled, thin, sharp. "Then I reckon nobody answered but me." They stood like that a long time, moonlight stretching between them like a blade. The man pointed to the guitar on Robert's back. "You play? Try to. Not good enough, though. You want more." Robert hesitated. "I want to play so well, folks forget their own names listening." The stranger chuckled low. "That's a mighty high want. What you willin' to give for it?" Robert looked down. Thought of the cotton fields, the empty belly, the faces turning away when he picked up his guitar. Thought of Virginia cold in her grave 'cause he'd chased music instead of money. He looked up. "Whatever it takes." The man nodded slow, like a preacher hearing a confession he'd been expecting. "Set that guitar down." Robert obeyed, hands trembling. The stranger crouched beside it, long fingers gleaming like polished wood in the moonlight. He took the guitar, tuned a single string, just one, and the sound that came out wasn't music. It was something older, like wind moaning through a church with no roof. Then he played a few notes, 6, maybe 7, and each one sank into the dirt like seeds. The dog howled once, then went silent. "Now you try," the man said, handing it back. Robert lifted the guitar. His fingers moved without thinking. The sound that came out was right, not pretty, not clean, just right, like the world had been, waiting on that chord to be struck. He played another. And then the stranger spoke soft. Play honest, and the world'll weep for you. Play false, and the world'll eat you alive. Robert tried to ask what that meant, but when he looked up, the man was gone. Just the dog sitting there, head tilted, watching. Then it stood, turned, and walked back down the road, disappearing into the dark. The air snapped back to life. Crickets chirped. A whip-poor-will called from the trees. Robert blinked, like waking from a fever dream. He looked at his hands. They were shaken, but his skin felt different, tighter, as if the bones had learned something the rest of him hadn't caught up to yet. He strummed once more. Lord help me. The sound was pure, like glass singing, like pain forgiven and returned with interest. When he walked back to town, the first gray of dawn was McCain, crawling up the sky. The juke joint was closed, but a few drunks lay asleep on the porch. He sat down, started playing. The first man to wake up thought he was dreaming. The second one started crying. By the time the sun cleared the tree line, Robert Johnson had become something else. Not just a man with a guitar, a conduit. Now, some folks say that story's nonsense, that he just practiced till his fingers bled, found his sound the hard way. And maybe that's true. But I've been in them, Delta fields myself. I know what the night feels like when it starts remembering its own ghosts. Out there, talent don't explain everything. There's power in the crossroads, always has been. The old Africans brought that belief with them when they came here in chains. They called it Legba, the spirit who opens the gate between worlds. You meet him where the roads cross. Leave him a gift, rum, tobacco, a song, and he'll grant you passage. But if you come empty-handed, he'll take what's most precious instead. The white folks twisted that story into something darker. Turned Legba into the devil, 'cause they couldn't imagine a power that didn't belong to their Bible. But down here, we know better. The devil ain't always red and horned. Sometimes he just looks like opportunity. And maybe that's who Robert met that night, Legba, or the devil, or the part of himself too wild to survive daylight. However you name it, the bargain held. After that night, he didn't just play music, he channeled it. Folks said when he played outside, the wind would follow the rhythm. Lamps flickered. Dogs lay down and whined. And no matter where he went, Greenville, Yazoo City, Tunica people swore the air turned heavy before he arrived, like the storm comes before the rain. One old bluesman, Calvin Bottlecap Reeves, told me he saw Robert perform at a fish fry in '33. Said halfway through, "Come on in my kitchen." A bolt of lightning hit the riverbank 50 yards away. Clear night, no clouds. The crowd screamed. Robert never missed a beat. That's the thing about the gifted and the damned, they don't scare easy. But it wasn't all wonder. Strange things started happening. He'd walk into a room and the babies would cry. Candles burned lower when he passed. Women said he could look at you and know what you'd done wrong without you telling him. And once, outside a juke joint near Rosedale, a man tried to pick a fight with him over a woman. They say Robert just looked him dead in the eye and smiled. The man dropped his knife, stumbled backward, and broke his leg on the steps. "Didn't touch him," a witness said. "Just looked." That's how you know a man's dealing with more than chords. There's another version of the story, told only by the old hoodoo women, the ones who still keep bottles of blue glass hanging in their yards to trap evil. They say Robert didn't just ask for talent. He asked for understanding. He wanted to know the language behind music, the thing that moves inside sound itself. That's why he could slide between joy and grief so quick he knew the pulse behind both. But knowledge has teeth, and once you learn the tongue of spirits, you can't unhear it. Maybe that's why, in every photo of him, he's never standing still. 1 foot forward, hat low, grin half finished as if he's caught between two places, between the road he came from and the one still waiting. Now, I've stood at that Clarksdale crossroad myself midnight. No cars, no light but the moon and a far-off porch lamp flickering. You can laugh if you want, but I swear I felt a hum in the ground. Not loud, not scary, just steady. Like somebody strumming one low note somewhere deep below. And I remembered something my granddaddy told me once. The devil don't tempt with sin, boy. He tempts with purpose. Makes you think he's answering your prayer. Maybe that's what Robert found out there, that talent ain't free, and every gift's got its echo. The proof's in the songs. Listen to Crossroad Blues. Hear the panic, the prayer. I went down to the crossroads, fell down on my knees. That ain't poetry, that's confession. And hellhound on my trail. You can almost hear the footsteps in the dust behind him. He wasn't running from death. He was running from the bill comin' due. After that night, he was never the same. Folks said he didn't sleep much, barely ate. Kept movin', always movin'. When people asked why, he'd grin and say, "I gotta stay ahead of my own song." I don't know what that means, but I know it sounds like a man who'd seen his reflection at the crossroads and didn't like what it said. Some claim he tried to break the deal. Later went to a preacher in Memphis. Asked for baptism. The preacher refused, said, "You can't wash off what's written in fire." Others say Robert laughed and kept playin', tellin' folks the devil don't scare him none 'cause they're on speakin' terms. Whichever tale you favor, the end's the same. The song stayed. The piece didn't. I think about that sometimes. Sittin' on my porch, hearin' some young fella playin' slide guitar down the road. They don't know they're speaking a language older than America, older than the cotton itself, a language that was born at a crossroads, under a black sky, between a man and his want. And I'll tell you this much. Every time one of them strings bends just right, somewhere out there, the wind listens and smiles. There ain't no sound on God's green earth like a juke joint on a Saturday night in the Delta. You can hear it before you see it, that thumpin' rhythm comin' through the cypress trees, the laughter, the hollers, the bottles clinkin' like a congregation of sin. The air's thick with smoke and sweat and the perfume of cheap gin. And the floorboards vibrate from 100 tired souls trying to dance their misery clean. It's holy in its own crooked way, a church for the broken. That's where Robert Johnson truly came alive. By the mid-1930 seconds, the man was a ghost on the move. Nobody knew where he'd show up next. Could be a fish fry in Yazoo City, a barrel house in Indianola, or some backwoods joint where the only light came from kerosene lamps and the moon itself. He'd wander in quiet, hat tilted low, guitar in hand. Never bragged, never begged. Just sat down on a chair in the corner and started to play. And Lord, when he did, the whole room forgot its own name. Now, I've heard men talk about sound like it's a thing you can measure. But what Robert had couldn't be measured. His music crawled inside you. He'd start soft thumb, picking that bass line steady, heartbeat sure, then the slide would come in, moaning like a soul losing its way. It wasn't loud. It was alive. Every note felt like it was spelling on somebody. The women leaned close. The men clenched their jaws. Even the old folks who came just to drink felt something stirring they hadn't felt in years. He didn't need a band, he was the band. That thumb of his kept time like a drum. His fingers danced like a second guitar. And his voice, well, it didn't sound human all the time. Sometimes high as a whippoorwill, sometimes low as a funeral bell. Like he was singing with two mouths, his and whatever he'd met at the crossroads. Folks called it devil's music. But you tell me what's more devilish, the man playing it or the pain that made him. I seen preachers come into those joints just to glare at him. One time, a reverend from Greenwood marched right up to Robert mid-song and said, "Son, that guitar of yours got hellfire on the strings." Robert just smiled, never stopping playing, and said, "Then I reckon I'm playing for both sides tonight, preacher." The crowd roared. The preacher left before the second verse. That was the thing about Robert, he didn't fight the rumors, he fed 'em. Maybe he knew myth lasts longer than truth. There's a story from Friar's Point, 1935. Robert was playing outside a grocery store, hat upside down for tips. A white man in a new Ford rolled up, leaned out his window, and said, "Boy, you sound like the devil himself." Robert stopped, smiled polite, and said, "Yes, sir, but the devil pay better than the cotton boss." Then he went right back to playing. That kind of talk could have got a man killed, but somehow, trouble never touched him, at least. Not yet. He was like a storm in shoe leather, drifting from one town to the next, leaving music and gossip in his wake. Everywhere he went, folks claimed strange things followed. One juke joint burned down the night after he left. A man who'd mocked him died of fever within the week. A woman who danced with him dreamed of a black dog, scratching at her door 3 nights in a row, then woke to find claw marks on the wood. Coincidence? Maybe. But around here, coincidence walks and talks like faith. Sometimes he'd sit alone by the river till dawn, picking slow, staring at the reflection of the moon in the water. One fella, Henry Sloan, swore he saw Robert's shadow move before his body did, like it was playing catch-up. Said he watched him play with no hands once, fingers hovering an inch above the strings while the sound kept going. Now, I ain't saying that's true, but I'll tell you this, people lie easy. But whole towns don't lie the same way for 90 years. By then, the record men had come south sniffing for talent. They found him in San Antonio in 1936, sitting outside a hotel with that battered guitar and a bottle of hooch. They took him upstairs, turned a hotel room into a studio, and had him face the corner of the wall to get the best sound. That's where he recorded 29 songs that changed American music forever. But folks didn't know that yet. All they knew was them songs felt haunted. You can hear it in "Come On In My Kitchen." That's not a love song, that's temptation whispering through the keyhole. And in "Preachin' Blues," he laughs while he plays, like he's mocking salvation itself. Then there's "Hellhound on My Trail." You listen close, you'll hear it, them footsteps. Slow, measured, always one step behind. I asked an old bluesman once what he thought that hellhound was. He said, "Boy, that ain't no dog, that's time." And he's right. The blues ain't about sin, it's about the clock running down on a man who's already given too much. After them recordings, Robert's name started floating like cottonseed on the wind. Every jukebox that could afford a record spun his songs till the grooves near wore smooth. But success didn't make him rich, didn't make him safe neither. He played for dollars and dimes, sleeping where he could, barns, alleys, women's porches. And Lord, the women. They say he could charm a snake and break a heart with the same smile. One juke owner said, "If you left your wife near Robert Johnson, you best play better than him or make peace with losing her. He'd flirt mid-song, wink mid-verse, make a woman think every word was for her alone." Maybe it was. Maybe that was part of the curse too much want in one man's body. Still, no matter how sweet the crowd, he never stayed long, always moving, like a man running from a bill come due. The juke owners started noticing something else. He never played the same song twice the same way. Said he'd change the chords, change the lyrics, even the tempo. One night, Crossroads Blues sounded like a cry for mercy. The next, it sounded like he was mocking the Lord for not showing up. It was like the music itself was shifting, under him, alive, hungry. And yet he could be gentle. He'd play lullabies for children, gospel hymns for old ladies, ragtime for farmers, Spanish guitar for girls who'd never left the county. Every tune sounded like it came from someplace different, like he was pulling songs from a well nobody else could find. One of the men who recorded him, Don Law, said later, "He didn't play to you. That's the kind of power that don't come from practice." Of course, not everyone was impressed. Plenty of folks wanted to believe he'd cheated to get that good. They said, "Ain't no way a man can play like that unless he's got help from the other side." maybe jealousy, maybe truth. Down here, they're cousins. Once, in a little shack near Drew, he started playing "If I Had Possession Over Judgment Day." Halfway through, a woman screamed and dropped her drink. Said she saw a figure standing behind him, tall, faceless, hand on his shoulder. Robert never looked back. Just kept playing till the lamp flickered out. Now, if you listen to the live stories, the ones passed from mouth to mouth, there's always that sense he knew more than he said. He'd smile when folks mentioned the Crossroads, but his eyes would go cold, like he was remembering something he wished he could forget. He told one friend, "I done been where the wind don't blow and the sun don't shine. But the music there's mighty fine." Then he laughed. But it wasn't the kind of laugh that makes other folks join in. Sometimes, at the end of the night, after the crowd cleared, he'd sit outside with a cigarette and hum to himself. A low, droning tune that didn't sound like any of his songs. A woman named Eula May told me she heard him once said the air got so cold her breath fogged. He turned to her and said, "Don't mind the chill. That's just the night remembering my name." She swore his eyes, glowed blue for a second. "I reckon that's the whiskey talking. But it's a good story, just the same. The truth is, the line between myth and man blurred long before he died. Down here, you don't get to choose what part of you becomes legend. And that's what makes Robert Johnson the soul of the Delta, not his guitar, not the devil, but that ache in his voice that sounded like every secret the South ever tried to bury. Now, I know some folks say music can't hold evil, that it's just notes and breath. But if you ever sit in a juke joint when the lights flicker and somebody starts playing Hellhound on My Trail, you tell me if you don't feel something leaning close behind you. Listening, that ain't imagination. That's memory. This land remembers. The old folks say, Robert died too young because he burned too hot, but I think he just ran out a night to run through. You can't live long when every note you play opens a door you can't close. So, next time you hear somebody call blues the devil's music, don't argue. Just nod slow and smile. Because maybe it is. But if it is, it's the kind of devil that tells the truth better than the saints ever did. And truth, down here, is worth every bit of damnation it costs. They say the Delta don't forget what it's owed. You can plow it, pray over it, bleed into it, don't matter. The land keeps a ledger, and if you cheat it long enough, sooner or later it comes to collect. Robert Johnson must have known that. He'd been cashing in on borrowed time since the night he walked out to them crossroads. For a while, though, you couldn't tell. The man burned bright, too bright. The brighter a flame, the shorter it lives. By 1937, his name was whispered in every juke joint south of Memphis. He was the phantom of Highway 61, drifting from town to town like smoke through keyholes. You'd hear that bottleneck slide before you saw him, that mournful cry of steel on string that could raise gooseflesh on a preacher's arm. But with every new song came something darker, a sense the air itself bent around him wrong. Storms followed his trail. I don't mean in a poetic way. I mean clouds, real ones, thunder and lightning that showed up the day before or the day after he played. Folks joked about it at first. Then they stopped joking. In August of '37, he played a dance out near Itabena. The air was so thick you could chew it. He'd just started Love in Vain when a wind came out of nowhere, slamming the shutters and blowing out every lamp in the place. The crowd froze, couldn't see nothing but the faint glow of his cigarette. Then, through the dark, his voice kept on, clear as day, not shouting, not scared calm like he was expecting it. When the lights flickered back, half the crowd was crying. That same night, a bolt hit a cypress tree outside and split it clean to the roots. Old-timers said that was the Delta reminding him who really owned the music. He'd started changing too. The jokes got rarer, the smile shorter. He'd play, then sit silent for hours, staring at the floor like he was listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear. One friend asked him once what was wrong. Robert said, "That dog been following me again." The friend laughed. "Ain't no dog here, man." Robert shook his head. "He don't need to be seen to keep up. You ever seen fear that deep? It don't show on the face. It lives in the bones." And yet he still played. Because what else could he do? The blues ain't a choice. It's an infection. Once you catch it, the only cure is to pass it along. He took to traveling mostly alone. Wouldn't ride with other musicians if he could help it. Honeyboy Edwards told me once that Robert said he liked the quiet. "If I keep talking, I can't hear what's behind me," he'd joke. But the way Honeyboy told it, that wasn't a joke at all. There was one stretch, late that summer, where he played 3 towns in a row, Clarksdale, Rosedale, and Greenville, and in each one, somebody died within a day. A gambler in a knife fight, a woman drowning in the river, a man struck by lightning on a clear afternoon. Now, you tell folks that, and they'll say it's coincidence. But the Delta don't believe in coincidence. Down here, we call that pattern. And patterns got power. People started whispering he carried a curse. Some said he'd gone back on his bargain, tried to outsmart the devil. One story says he played gospel in a juke joint one night, just to prove he still could. The next morning, his hands were swollen so bad he couldn't bend his fingers. Took a week before he could play again. He never touched gospel after that. Said, "Ain't my side of the street no more." But the curse wasn't all bad luck. It was attraction too. Women still followed him like moths to a lamp, even after he warned them not to. He'd tell them, "Don't love me too long. I ain't built to stay." Some laughed, some cried. One, they say, disappeared. That's a story the locals keep half-buried, a woman named Clara Thomas, from a plantation outside Belzoni. She sang with him a few nights, traveling down the road, pretty as morning dew and twice as quick to vanish. One day she was there. Next, she wasn't. Her dress was found near a riverbank, folded neat. Shoes sitting beside it. They never found her body. Robert wouldn't talk about it, except to mutter, "She shouldn't have sung that song." The old folks took that as proof enough. His music wasn't just calling spirits. It was feeding them. There was another sign the curse was growing. He'd started drinking harder, more careless. Before, he'd sip slow, savor the burn. Now he gulped like a man trying to drown the noise inside his head. Sometimes he'd stop mid-song, stare at his hands, and whisper, "They still mine." Then he'd laugh too loud, too long. People who knew him said he carried 2 faces. By day, quiet, polite. More than one woman swore his voice changed halfway through a song, dropping low and rough, like another man had taken the verse. You ask me, that's not possession. That's exhaustion from fighting what you invited in. There's an old rule down here. Never sing what you don't believe. Robert broke that rule every time he played. And the songs started talking back. He'd play Me and the Devil Blues and grin when folks got nervous, saying, "Early this morning when you knocked upon my door, I said, 'Hello, Satan. I believe it's time to go.'" Then he'd wink, like it was a joke. But if you caught his eyes in that moment, there wasn't a trace of laughter. My granddaddy swore he saw him once, out near the tracks in Tutwiler, right before dawn. Said Robert was sitting on the Robert ground, guitar across his knees, playing to nobody. When Granddaddy got close, he realized Robert wasn't alone. He saw the outline of another figure, leaning beside him. Couldn't make out a face, but the air shimmered like heat over asphalt. Granddaddy froze. Then Robert looked up, smiled soft, and said, "Morning, Mr. Beau LeClair's people," and kept playing. Granddaddy left without saying a word. He didn't talk about it till he was old enough to start forgetting things. Now, maybe he imagined it. But the funny part? He didn't know my name would be Beau back then. My mama didn't even name me yet, so you tell me how he said that. See, that's the curse. It don't just haunt the man. It ripples. Like a stone thrown in muddy water, the waves keep reaching new shores. And Robert's waves still ain't done. There's a photo of him, one of the only 3 we got, and I can't look at it too long. He's smiling, head tilted, cigarette between 2 fingers. Looks harmless enough till you notice his left eye, the one that don't quite line up with the other. It's looking past the camera, at something else entirely. Like he's seeing the man who's taken the picture and the shadow behind him. Sometimes I think that's what the blues really is. The space between a man and his shadow. By 1938, he'd run out of road. Folks in the Delta said he'd been acting strange, playing harder, faster, almost frantic. He'd show up, do 3 nights straight, then vanish before sunup. One musician, Johnny Shine, said he was trying to outrun something, but he wouldn't say what. He never did. The last time anybody saw him play was at a place called Three Forks. Wood floors, tin roof, air so thick with smoke you could chew it. He'd been flirting with the owner's wife, a mistake even the devil would call reckless. Somebody handed him an open bottle of whiskey that night. He took a long pull, smiled, and said, "Tastes funny." Couple hours later, he was on the floor, sweating, groaning, howling like a hound that had been struck. He lingered 3 days. No doctor, no priest, just the music humming low, like it was keeping time with his breath. They buried him in an unmarked grave under a pecan tree. Or maybe they didn't. 3 different churches claim him. Maybe that's the devil's sense of humor won't let the world agree on where to leave him. After that, the story started growing teeth. Men said they saw him walking the highway long after he died. Truck drivers swear they've picked up a hitchhiker in a black suit, guitar case in hand, who disappears when they reach Clarksdale. Others say they've heard him playing from empty fields, that same ghostly slide carrying through the fog. Even the weather remembers him. When the sky turns that sickly green before a storm, old women cross themselves and whisper, "The bluesman's tuning up," and maybe he is. I don't pretend to know what he traded or who he met that night, but I do know this. He didn't take the curse alone. He passed it on to every man or woman who's ever tried to squeeze truth out of 6 strings. Listen to Muddy, to B, to Clapton, to Hendrix, the ghost of Robert's bargains in all of it. You can't unhear a sound like that once it's in the world. When I was a boy, my daddy told me never to whistle at night. Said it calls things that ain't meant to come. Maybe playing the blues is the same way calling something you can't send back once it answers. That's the real curse. Not death, not damnation. Just the eternal echo of your own want, coming back to haunt you in perfect pitch. Every summer, I drive out to that crossroads. There's a tourist sign now, blue guitars, a gift shop nearby. Folks taking selfies, laughing, drinking sweet tea out of paper cups. They don't hear what I hear. If you cut the engine, if you wait till the cicadas pause and the wind dips low, you can still catch it, a faint hum, a slide note carried by the dirt. Same sound Robert left behind, a reminder, a warning, a curse that sounds suspiciously like grace. There's a saying down here, ain't no good story ends clean. And that's true for most men who wrestle with the blues. By the time Robert Johnson reached the end of his road, it wasn't fame or fortune that caught him. It was a bottle and a whisper. Now, folks'll tell you a dozen versions of how he died. Every one of them sounds half right and half drunk. That's the thing about legends. Truth gets boiled down till it's thick enough to spread like molasses. But I'll give you the one I trust. The one passed through my granddaddy's friend, a man who was there at Three Forks store that night, when Robert took his last breath. It was late August, 1938. Mississippi summer hot, mean, and hummin'. The air was heavy with sweat and sawdust and the smell of bad whiskey. Three Forks wasn't much of a place. Tin roof, plank floor, oil lamps hanging low, and a crowd that came to forget how hard life was. Robert had been playing in the area for weeks. He'd gotten too famous for the Delta, but too black for the record men to treat fair. Still, he didn't stop. Couldn't. Like I said, the blues don't ask if you're ready. It just takes over. He'd been flirting with a woman that week, pretty, light-skinned, wife of the joint's owner. Name was Beatrice. Folks said she had eyes like summer rain and a temper like July thunder. Robert liked that kind. Always did. Didn't matter if she belonged to someone else. He'd play a tune, tip his hat, and the rest was written before the night began. Her husband, Henry, saw it too. Didn't say much, not at first. Just watched. Waited. Men like him don't yell. They plot. On that Saturday night, Robert showed up late, guitar case in hand, dressed, sharper than a preacher at Easter. The place was packed, sweat dripping down the walls, music spilling out the windows. When he walked in, the noise dropped like somebody hit pause on the world. Then he grinned, tipped his hat, and folks went wild. He played 3 hours straight, never the same song twice, never breaking a sweat. He sang Love in Vain, Ramblin' on My Mind, from 4 till late. Men clapped, women swayed. Even Henry smiled, pouring him a drink himself, a long-neck bottle half full of amber fire. Robert nodded his thanks, uncapped it, and took a pull. That was the first mistake. Now, back in those days, nobody thought twice about poison. There wasn't CSI, no autopsy, no sheriff with a microscope. If a man drank something bad and died, folks said it was his time. Robert started sweating before the second set. Not from heat, from pain. Said his stomach was twisting like barbed wire. He took another swig from that same bottle, trying to wash it away. By the third song, he couldn't stand. He dropped to one knee mid-verse, still playing, voice rough and cracked. You may bury my body down by the highway side. Then he fell flat. They carried him outside, laid him in the dirt. No doctor, no law. Just scared folks standing around, muttering about curses. Someone said, "Get the preacher." Another said, "Too late. The devil's already here." He lingered 3 days. Fever, convulsions, muttering under his breath words nobody could understand. One woman, who sat with him through the second night, said he kept trying to tune an invisible guitar. His fingers moved, plucking air, humming low, eyes glassy. At one point, he whispered, "I gotta pay the fiddler." Then he laughed till it turned to coughing. When he finally went quiet, it was early morning. Sun not up yet, roosters not crowing. They say a stray dog howled just once, then stopped. No wind, just silence so deep it felt alive. He was 27 years old. That number 27, it's cursed now. Every musician who dies young gets tied to it. But Robert started that myth long before rock stars claimed it. Maybe he didn't mean to set the pattern. But that's what happens when you cut a deal. You can't cancel it. Keeps renewing itself through other folks who want what you wanted. They buried him in the red dirt behind Zion Church, or so the first story went. But the next county over swore he was buried near Payne Chapel, and another claimed Mount Zion. 3 graves, 3 markers, 3 towns, and not one certainty. The way I see it, that's the devil's final joke, never letting anybody know where to kneel. Now, there was a preacher, Reverend James Wilburn, who came to see him just before he died. A young man then, righteous and scared in equal measure. He tried to baptize Robert, but the other folks pulled him back. Said it wasn't right to bless a man who'd cursed his own name. Reverend Wilburn told me years later, when his hair was white and his hands shook from age, I looked in that boy's eyes, and I saw regret fighting with pride. He wanted mercy, but he wanted the music more. Then the preacher added, I reckon the devil don't take you till you stop singing. And Robert never stopped. There's something in that worth pondering. Maybe the devil don't steal souls. Maybe he just waits till you give up the song that kept you human. After his death, the music didn't stop. Those records, 29 songs cut in San Antonio and Dallas, kept playing. People heard him different after he was gone. Before, they were just good blues. After, they were prophecies. Every line sounded like he'd seen the end coming and wrote it down to warn the rest of us. Listen to Crossroad Blues. You can hear it plain. Desperation, bargaining, faith, twisted thin as thread. That's not performance, that's testimony. And Hellhound on My Trail? That's confession, recorded on shellac. He knew. He'd been livin' on borrowed verses. A year after his death, a preacher from Greenwood gave a sermon about him, said, "That boy made the devil dance, and now he's dancing too." Folks in the pews nodded, half scared, half thrilled. You can condemn a man all you want, but deep down, everyone loves a sinner who made his sin sound holy. And that's what Robert did. He turned damnation into melody. But the strange thing is, the preacher who condemned him didn't rest easy neither. A week later, lightning hit his church steeple during Sunday service. Didn't kill him, but it burned the cross clean off the roof. They rebuilt it, of course. But folks said from that day on, the bells never rang. Right sounded just a little flat, like the whole place had picked up the wrong key. Now, I ain't saying Robert cursed him, but maybe words carry further than we think when they're sung instead of spoken. The mystery deepened in the years after. Nobody could find his death certificate for decades. No photo from the funeral. Just scattered memories, a man playing under the pecan tree. A sound of strings echoing through the swamp. A grave that moved when no one was looking. It was almost like the Delta refused to bury him, and maybe it did. 'Cause how do you bury music? My cousin Raymond swore he met a hitchhiker near Drew in 1952. Said the fella looked thin, pale. But his hands were clean, no calluses. Just scars shaped like strings. He asked for a ride to Clarksdale. Raymond said sure, and they drove a few miles in silence. Then the man looked at him, said, "They still talking about me?" Raymond laughed. "Who?" "The one who beat the devil." Raymond looked again. Seat was empty. He drove the rest of the way with the windows down, swearing he smelled tobacco and sweat in the breeze. Didn't stop till daylight. You can believe that or not. I do. Because the thing about the Delta, it don't just hold ghosts, it recycles them. Every note played down here's got an ancestor humming underneath. The preacher, Reverend Wilburn, told me something before he died in the 70s. He said, "I still pray for that boy, because I don't think hell took him. I think he stayed right here." You ever notice? Every time a new storm hits, the first thunderclap sounds like a guitar string breaking. He wasn't joking. He meant it. He said he could still hear Robert singing when the rain came down heavy. Voice faint but steady, saying, "Ain't done playing yet." Maybe that's the real curse, not damnation, not poison, just the refusal to die quiet. I've stood at all three of them, graves, Zion, pain, Mount, and everyone's got something strange about it. The grass grows thicker there. The air hums faintly, and every so often, somebody leaves a fresh bottle of whiskey on the headstone, cork still in, label turned toward the road like an invitation. Nobody knows who leaves it. Nobody dares take it. One night I stayed late near Mount Zion. Full moon, hot wind, crickets loud enough to drown thought. I'd had 2 bourbons and more curiosity than sense. I sat by the grave and said, "Robert, you still playin'?" Didn't expect an answer. Didn't get one either, not in words. But I heard 3 soft plucks, like someone testin' strings. And I swear on my mama's rosary, the air tasted like smoke and honey right after. I left that bottle untouched and walked out backward. The way we do when we leave a spirit's resting place to show respect and keep from inviting it to follow. I ain't been back after midnight since. So when folks ask me where Robert Johnson's buried, I tell 'em everywhere. In the fields, in the songs, in the rain that smells like whiskey and lightning. He ain't gone. He just learned how to linger. And as for that preacher who said, "The devil will find him anyway," well, maybe he did. But maybe when he found him, he sat down, took off his hat and said, "Son, play me one more tune. You ever drive Highway 61 at dusk? The road runs straight as sin from New Orleans clear up to Minnesota. But it don't belong to the whole country. It belongs to the Delta, to the ghosts who paved it long before there was asphalt. You ride that highway with the windows down, and you'll hear it the low hum of history. Half wind, half music. Every mile sings, and every note sounds like Robert Johnson. See, after he died, the world forgot him for a while. That's how the Delta works. A man burns bright, the fire dies, and the ashes get plowed into the dirt like fertilizer for the next story. But music has a memory of its own, and by the time the 1,950 seconds rolled in, that memory started stirring again. Out of the cotton fields came new names: Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Elmore James, men who'd grown up hearing tales of a bluesman who'd met the devil and outplayed him. They called him a myth, a legend, but they also called him teacher. They built their sound out of his bones, and when they plugged it into electricity, the ghost started walking again, louder this time. Every bottleneck slide, every moan in a Chicago alley, every guitar string bent till it cried was another echo of that old bargain. Robert never needed resurrection. He just needed amplification. By the 1,960 seconds, them echoes had crossed the ocean. British boys with long hair and borrowed accents were digging through American record bins, finding names nobody here bothered to remember. When they dropped the needle on King of the Delta Blues singers, they heard more than music. They heard prophecy. Eric Clapton said the first time he listened to Crossroads Blues, it felt like meeting God and the devil in the same chord. Keith Richards thought there were two guitars, playing till someone told him it was just one man. And Bob Dylan, well, he took Highway 61 and made it a metaphor for the whole American soul. He said, "Something about those songs sounded like they knew the truth before I did." They weren't wrong. Robert's ghost had gone global. I remember when the first wave of British blues hit the South. We all sat around the radio listening to young men with fancy gear and London voices trying to sound like sharecroppers. Some of them came close, but none of them could touch the heat, because you can learn the notes, but you can't fake the dirt they grew from. Still, I ain't knocking them. They carried the sound when America had almost buried it. When they sang about Crossroads, they didn't know they were keeping a promise made under a Mississippi moon 40 years earlier. Funny thing about promises, they don't expire. They just change shape. One summer, I took a trip north on 61, just to see how far the blues had traveled. Stopped in Memphis, first walked Beale Street, where the neon hums and the ghosts tune up before sunset. Then I headed north through the Arkansas cotton and into Missouri, all the way to Street, Louis. Everywhere I stopped, there was somebody playing Robert's songs, a busker outside a cafe, a kid with a beat-up fender, an old man tapping his cane in rhythm. It was like the whole highway was still humming his key. The only difference was, the world had learned to dance to the curse instead of fear it. There's a club up there near Clarksdale called Ground Zero. Place smells like barbecue, beer, and redemption. I stopped in one night to hear a young woman named Lula Mae Rivers sing. 22. Voice like thunder wrapped in honey. She sang Me and the Devil Blues. Slow, raw, each word hanging in the air long enough to bruise. When she finished, I asked her why she picked that song. She said, "Because it sounds like the truth, and truth's what the blues is made of." Then she laughed, added, "Plus, the devil's got better chord changes than the church." I liked her right away. That's when it hit me, Robert didn't die cursed. He died contagious. You can feel it even now, in the cracks of this country, every time somebody picks up a guitar, hoping to make sense of their own hurt. The deal renews itself. Pain for beauty, sorrow for rhythm, truth for peace. Same contract, different hands. But the thing folks forget is that Robert's story ain't just about the devil. It's about the Delta. That's the real crossroads where African rhythm met European melody. where cotton dust mixed with gospel breath, where suffering turned into art because there wasn't nothing else left to do. It's where America learned how to sing about itself. Now, I ain't one for big speeches, but I believe the blues is the closest thing we got to scripture that tells the truth. Because in church, they promise salvation. Blues. You just make peace with your demons and keep playing till daylight. You drive that stretch of 61 through the cotton rows at twilight, and you'll see what I mean. The land itself hums. The sky bleeds orange and purple like a wound that never healed right. Every field's a graveyard of songs, every ditch full of echoes, and somewhere out there, always somewhere, you can hear a guitar slide across eternity, mournful and alive all at once. Ain't no highway like it, ain't no ghost louder. I once met a preacher up near Tunica who claimed he'd purged the Delta of its demons. He'd built himself a new kind of revival tent. Big, white, shiny thing with speakers and spotlights, calling it the cleansing. Said he was going to pray away the blues. I told him, "Preacher, you can't exorcise what built the church." He didn't laugh, but the storm that rolled through that night sure did. Lightning took out every power line for 20 miles. I passed his tent the next day, half melted. Hymnals scattered like dead birds, and right there on the wet ground was a torn poster flapping in the wind. The only word left legible was Crossroads. You can't wash off what's in the soil. There's a part of me that believes Highway 61 ain't just a road, it's a vein. Carries blood from the past to the present, feeding every note we call American. It runs through Memphis gospel, Chicago blues, Detroit soul, and even that loud electric rock that kids think they invented. Robert's fingerprints are on all of it. You listen to Purple Haze, you're hearing him. You listen to Layla, Gimme Shelter. When the levee breaks, all of it's the same ghost-changing clothes. Sometimes, when I'm driving that road alone, I wonder if he ever meant for it to go this far. If he knew that deal he made, whatever it was, would spill out of the Delta and soak the whole world. I like to think he'd grin about it. He always did have a taste for irony. But I also wonder if maybe he got what he wanted after all, not fame, not riches, just remembrance. That's the only currency that matters to a musician. You die twice down here. Once when you stop breathin', and once when the world stops hummin' your tune. And Robert Johnson, the world's still hummin'. There's a story I heard from a bus driver out of Baton Rouge. He said sometimes, late at night, when he's alone on the road and the radio static fades, he hears a faint guitar playing through the engine noise. Same melody every time, slow, mournful, a little off-key. He'll check his radio, check the CB. Nothing. Then, just before the sound fades, a voice hums low. "Ain't done playing yet." The driver says he keeps a bottle of whiskey in the glove box now, just in case he ever has to share the ride. Maybe that's crazy talk. Or maybe Highway 61 just remembers its first prophet. The scholars'll tell you, Robert. Johnson revolutionized chord structure, rhythm, tonality, all that talk that turns art into math. But Beau LeClair'll tell you different. He revolutionized what it meant to be haunted. He proved that music ain't about perfection. It's about possession, being overtaken by something bigger than you and letting it speak. Every great musician since has felt that pull. Some call it inspiration. Some call it madness. Down here, we just call it the echo. And echoes don't fade easy in the Delta. They bounce off the river, off the levees, off the gravestones till they find new throats to sing through. That's why I figure Robert ain't gone. He just keeps changing voices. Maybe that's what he meant when he said, "I gotta pay the fiddler." The payment never stops. It just moves down the line, hitching rides and guitars and jukeboxes and human hearts. Last time I drove that road, the sun was dying behind the trees, painting everything in that syrupy red light. The South wears so well. I pulled over near the sign that says Clarksdale, home of the blues. Turned off the engine. The air was thick and still, like the world holding its breath, and I swear from somewhere far off, I heard it a slide guitar, slow and lonely. riding the wind. Maybe a radio in somebody's house. Maybe something else. Didn't matter. I tipped my hat and said, "Evenin', Robert." And the sound bent up once, like an answer. You can laugh if you want, but I'll tell you the Delta don't bury its music. It recycles it. And as long as Highway 61 keeps running, the ghost of Robert Johnson still thummin' rides one note at a time. They say you can't outrun the devil, but truth is, most folks never even see him comin'. He don't come with horns or fire. He comes with an offer, and every one of us, sooner or later, gets one. Now, I ain't saying I've ever seen him myself, but I've seen his handiwork. He don't haunt the wicked, he haunts the gifted. And maybe that's why the story of Robert Johnson still breathes, because every soul with a dream big enough to swallow him whole hears a bit of their own heartbeat in it. You stand out on that Clarksdale crossroads at midnight and the land feels alive. Not loud alive. The air hums low, the gravel shifts under your boots, and the moon sits up there like a silver coin somebody flipped to decide a man's fate. Heads heaven, tails everything else. I've stood there more than once, hat off, not saying much, just listening. The first time, I was young and full of questions. The last time, I was old enough to know answers ain't worth near as much as good stories. But both times, I swear I felt it that same pull Robert must have felt. That whisper that says, "There's more if you want it." And that's where it gets dangerous, because the devil don't tempt lazy men. He tempts the hungry ones. Robert was hungry. Hungry to play, to be heard, to carve his name into something bigger than dust. And when he got it, it consumed him whole. But maybe that's not tragedy. Maybe that's the price of greatness, giving your life to something so completely that there's nothing left of you when it's done. People like to talk about that bargain like it was evil. But tell me, what's the difference between a preacher giving his life to the pulpit and a bluesman giving his to the song? Both are preaching. Just depends who you're singing to. I've been around long enough to know that down here, God and the devil share the same stage, they just play different sets. And the blues sits right in the middle, keeping time for both. Sometimes I wonder what really happened that night at the crossroads. Maybe Robert met a spirit. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just faced himself under a sky too wide to lie to. But something changed in him, and the world been vibrant and different ever since. You can trace it if you listen, right from that dusty intersection to every record that ever made you feel something you couldn't explain. From the hum of a slide guitar to the wail of a gospel choir. From the blues to rock to soul to everything that ever made somebody close their eyes and nod like they just recognized their own pain set to rhythm. That's his ghost. Still working. Still tuning up every generation that thinks it's invented passion. And don't think for a second the devil don't keep score. He's patient. He don't collect souls in bulk, he collects them one song at a time. Every time somebody says, "I'd give anything to make it," he leans in closer. He don't need your signature. He just needs your silence when the music's done. That's when he knows he's got you. I think about that sometimes when I watch young kids playing at the bars down in Jackson or New Orleans. They got talent. No doubt fingers flying, voices sharp. But sometimes I see that look hungry, restless, desperate to matter. And I want to tell them, be careful what you ask for. You might just get it. But they wouldn't listen. Nobody ever does till it's too late. The curse of the blues ain't death, it's remembrance. Robert's gone, but we can't stop calling him back. Every time we play his songs, we open that door again. And on quiet nights, I swear something steps through. You ask old folks around Clarksdale, they'll tell you stories. About headlights that flicker when you pass his graves. About guitars that go out of tune when the air turns humid. About the faint smell of whiskey and sweat right before a summer storm. They say it's him. Checking in, making sure we ain't forgotten the rules of the bargain. Play honest, die remembered. There's worse fates than that. When I was a boy, I thought selling your soul meant losing it forever. Now I think maybe it just means trading it for something you believe in more than for yourself. Maybe Robert didn't sell his soul at all. Maybe he invested it. And look at the returns. Every artist who's ever reached for something divine through dirt owes him interest. I drove by Dockery Plantation not long ago, where the first blues riffs were born. The fields are quiet now, machines do the work men used to bleed for. But the air still hums with that same ghost rhythm. Wind whipping through the cypress, cicadas playing backup. And I thought, maybe this whole land's the devil's guitar, every note that's ever been played just an echo strumming the strings of Mississippi itself. They paved over a lot of pain down here. But pain's got roots. It grows back. One night, I stopped by a juke joint outside Greenwood, one of the last real ones left. Wooden walls, tin roof, neon light buzzing half out, a smell of fried catfish and spilled beer. An old man was on stage, must have been 70 if he was a day. Hands shaking, but Lord, when he started playing, the years fell right off him. He sang, "Come on in my kitchen," slow, mournful. He said, "Ain't learned, just remembered." I asked him remembered from who. He smiled. Don't matter, he still listens. That stuck with me, because maybe that's all the devil ever does, listen. He don't force, he don't bargain. He just waits for us to start humming the tune he already taught us. You can hear him everywhere if you know what to listen for. In the preacher shouting too loud, in the young girl singing her heartbreak to a crowd that'll forget her name, in the whistle of a train at night when you can't sleep, even in the silence between thunderclaps. The devil ain't in hell, he's in the echoes. And maybe that's all right, because if he's listening, then maybe God is too. Maybe they take turns. I reckon the reason Robert's story still pulls at us is because it ain't about sin, it's about want. Every man's got something he wants more than peace. For some, it's money. For others, it's love. For Robert, it was sound. Pure, unfiltered, eternal. And he found it, even if it killed him. I heard a young fella once say, "Ain't no crossroads left in this world." I told him, "Son, every choice you make is one. Every time you choose between what's easy and what's true, you're standing right there with the dust rising at your feet and the moon watching to see which way you'll turn. That's the real crossroad. And the devil still listens. Sometimes I think about that night he died, the preacher kneeling, the fever breaking, the last breath drawn. Maybe the devil didn't come for him at all. Maybe the music did. Maybe the same spirit that met him at the crossroads came back to walk him home. Because there's mercy in the sound, if you listen close enough. The way I see it, heaven ain't choirs of angels. It's one perfect note holding steady in the dark. And hell? Hell's the same note, but you can't stop hearing it. Robert found both. And somehow he made 'em rhyme. Now I ain't a preacher, and I sure ain't no saint, but I've lived long enough to see the pattern. Every time somebody finds something worth dying for, the world calls it a curse. But maybe it's salvation just shaped different. Maybe the blues ain't devil music after all. Maybe it's just the sound of a man meeting God halfway and not blinking. When the nights get still and the wind slides in from the river, I take my guitar off the wall and play a little. Nothing fancy, just 3 chords and some memory. And if the air thickens, if the porch light flickers, I don't mind. I know who's listening, and I play it honest. Every note, because if the devil's out there, I reckon he's earned the right to hear a good song once in a while. And if Robert's still wandering that long road somewhere between heaven and the delta, maybe he hums along. So if you ever find yourself driving south on Highway 61, roll down your window when you hit Clarksdale. Cut the engine, let the night come in. If you hear a faint guitar crying in the dark, don't be afraid. Just nod. You're hearing proof that some stories never die, they just keep playing in a lower key. And remember what I told you, every man's got his own crossroads waiting. Ain't about devils, ain't about deals. It's about what you're willing to give for what you love. The rest of us just hum along behind him, hoping our songs last half as long. Because down here, the music don't end. It just bends. And somewhere beyond the cypress and the cotton, the devil still listens.